Great to be back with FromTextToSpeech.com for Season 4 of this podcast is uncalled for. Warning, this episode contains strong language or mature themes. Parental discretion is advised.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Alright.
Cool.
Welcome to this podcast is uncalled for.
What's uncalled for about it?
Oh, you can't tell anything in this.
I'm listening.
Oh my god, what are you doing?
I worship Cthulhu just for the free beer.
Eggs are cheap and so are pancakes.
But you didn't even give a chance for a wild card spot!
What are we doing with Tier 1?
And you're like, what did you just say?
Yeah.
The exact sound I make when I'm...
That is uncalled for, Michael.
Well, the name of this podcast is Stuff Uncalled For?
This podcast is uncalled for.
Podcast, alright.
Yeah, that was the most ridiculous ending to that game that I've ever seen.
Oh my gosh, I gotta hurry up. Oh my gosh, I gotta hurry up. Oh my gosh, I gotta hurry up.
We're looking at each other in the eye. We're not going to say anything derogatory to the other person. And, of course, neither of us is drunk.
So I don't hear Pope Francis saying that he's a prophet, seer, and revelator.
What planet are these people on?
And the Lord, thank you back from.
See, this is a disgrace.
How'd that happen?
And it's got Chick-fil-A.
Don't allow you to think.
Hey, we're getting somewhere.
And now, your host for this podcast, Mike Chernevsky.
Fuji!
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. Today's going to be a very special episode of This Podcast is Uncalled For. We have a very special guest, so please go ahead and introduce yourself and the topic we'll be talking about.
Curran. Oh, yes. We're going to be talking today about the man, the myth, the very unsuspect legend, the very grifty, slimy, grimy, silent man himself, Stanley Kroenke.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I'm going to introduce myself a bit first before we kind of get into it. So my name is Curran. I study and work in Amsterdam. I am a long-time Arsenal fan. I grew up in London and been a season ticket holder for as far as I can remember. I've been going to the games. Every time I'm home, I can try and catch the games. I try and watch the games whenever I'm out here, even in Holland. And you can tell I'm an obsessive. I wear the colors, I go everywhere, I wear it proud, you know. And this cunt has ruined my club.
Yes, he has.
And I feel like that is a sentiment shared by a lot of people over in America as well.
Especially myself. How his full name, Enos Stanley Kroenke. Don't know if you knew that.
Enos.
Yeah.
That's going to be great for the football chants.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I can think of 100 right off the top of my head.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he was named after Enos Slaughter and Stan Musial, considered two of the greatest St. Louis Cardinal baseball players ever.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He did his college, I think, at University of Missouri, which is 2 hours
as far
west.
as I can remember, yes.
Yeah, 2 hours west of where I'm sitting right now. And he made his wealth in real estate, even more specifically, a little-known company called Walmart. In fact, he is married into the Walton family. So,
and Walton Kroenke, I think.
That is correct. Yes.
Yeah, I've been trying to do a little bit of reading up on this guy ever since he's muscled our way into over here in England, well, over in Europe side at least.
Sure. So how you got into sports here? Well, when the then LA Rams, this is 94, I'm talking about 1994, when they moved to St. Louis to begin with, Georgia Frontier needed a minority shareholder to help make it work, and that minority shareholder wound up being Stan Kroenke. After that move, they do win a Super Bowl, famously Super Bowl 34, which I saw in its entirety, and that was my team, the St. Louis Rams. And they got to another Super Bowl 2 years later, and then 12 years of mediocrity, precipitated in parts by Georgia passing away from breast cancer, and her children taking over her share of the club, which was very, very nearly bought up by another guy I think you'd be familiar with in English football. That'd be Shahid Khan, excuse me.
Shahid Khan, yes.
Yeah. He almost bought
makes his money.
Yeah. So
who makes his money at Manchester City, of course. So yeah.
Khan wound up buying Fulham.
Well, he wound up buying Fulham, but he was part backer at Manchester City first, and then he sold his shares.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Sheikh Mansour. Yeah, no, he's had actually quite a long history in English football. So he's been around. He's been sniffing around like teams for a while. So he was at Manchester City when he was back. They were back in the Championship. So this was a long time ago, before the club the Mansours took over, and before they became the international powerhouses that they are now.
Cool.
But
I did not know that.
It's actually quite interesting how a lot of these stories tend to intersect, because what you were describing with the St. Louis Rams pretty much sounds like Arsenal over the last 15 years, pretty much. We used to be great. We were known as the Invincibles at one point because we went an entire season unbeaten, which has never been done in Premier League history.
Right.
We'd won the double twice under Arsene Wenger. So that is the FA Cup and the Premier League in this one season. So we have two major domestic competitions, a minor domestic competition, and then you have the European competitions as well. So you have a lot of different trophies to play for during a season. And the most prestigious ones in England are the FA Cup, the Premier League, and then you have the Champions League, which is the European Cup, former European Cup.
Yep. Cool. So anyways,
but it just sounds very familiar.
It's going to get even more familiar coming up here soon. So Khan tries to buy the Rams, but Stan, in his agreement with Georgia, had a right of first refusal, which he exercised. We're talking about 2010 at this point, so about 11 years ago. He exercised his right of first refusal, and then now we're going into the heart of the St. Louis argument. So unfortunately, when the Rams first came to St. Louis, their the lease they signed on the Dome had a pretty unfortunate clause that said that the Dome had to be in the top 25% quality-wise of NFL stadiums in 10-year intervals. Well, kind of hard to do when
that's a nigh unheard of kind of clause you'd hear in Europe.
Yeah.
Just to point out,
I understand.
I'm sure these kind of sort of clauses are part and parcel of maybe how the NFL runs, but in Europe, just
my understanding in Europe,
experience anything like that.
Yeah, my understanding in Europe, you guys own the stadiums. The clubs own the stadiums, right? In Europe.
Yes. So by virtue of owning the club, Stan Kroenke owns the Emirates Stadium in London currently. So, but he owns them through Arsenal, and Arsenal are owned through KSE Holdings Group. So that's kind of how it's a long chain of holding companies. Basically.
In the States, it's common for the stadiums to be owned by the local government, and then leased out to a team. So, and that was that's
how it used to be in England, but then they privatized them a long time ago. Well, at least the major ones for the Premier League. A lot of the smaller club stadiums get part funded by the government, but it's tends to be mostly for the Premier League clubs. At least you're running on your own. Well, some certain exceptions. West Ham, for example, they took over the Olympic Stadium recently, and that was quite controversial because the taxpayers had basically paid for it, and they had only paid not even 15% of its value in fees to the government to take over the stadium, and that's been kind of controversial because it feels like a lot of other fans have been subsidizing West Ham's expansion.
Right.
But these kind of dirty dealings tend to happen in a lot of sports, actually. Now I'm coming to think about it.
Yeah.
So what you're describing in the NFL, what happens in the Premier League, Italian clubs are even worse.
Yeah.
If you look at the La Liga or Serie A, the corruption amongst those clubs are immense. And then that's not even getting onto UEFA, FIFA, organizations like that. They all play in this sort of symbiotic game of will you scratch my back and I scratch yours. And this is kind of where Kroenke comes into play here, because he's sort of tried to infiltrate this sort of ecosystem and then kind of subvert it for his own gain, which is quite interesting to look at, because I feel like a lot of the tactics he's used in the US, he's tried to replicate in Europe to varying degrees of success.
Right. So to give you an idea just how far back in terms of quality, the Dome, which is a nice stadium, I will say that. I've been to the Dome a couple of times. It's a very nice. It's a lot nicer than Arrowhead Stadium, which is like 45 minutes from me. So, my opinion. But
it's better than the god awful monstrosity they built to replace it in LA as well. Because
yeah, that got almost monstrosity, which Stan paid for entirely out of pocket. And I'll get
he didn't pay for it out of pocket. This is the funny thing. He didn't pay for it out of pocket. He leveraged loans off the back of Arsenal's commercial revenue.
Wow.
That's how he paid for it. So actually, fans in London were paying for a stadium in LA.
Yeah. So the first 10 years of
he is a really shifty bugger.
So first 10 years of that stadium lease in St. Louis. So we had Jacksonville, Carolina, Washington, Baltimore, Tampa, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Tennessee, Denver, Pittsburgh, Detroit, New England, Seattle, Houston, and Philly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 15 NFL clubs in those first 10 years of the Dome's existence built new stadiums. So kind of hard to be in the top 25% when half the league has new places to play, and then another 5 in the second 10 years. And Georgia, those first 10 years, she gave St. Louis mulligans, and just do some minor upgrades on the place and we'll be fine. But of course, as I said, she passed away. Stan takes over.
It got neglected.
Yeah.
It got neglected. Yeah.
And
that sounds,
and of course, keep in mind,
familiar,
St. Louis, that Dome is publicly owned. And there's only so much they can do with tax revenue. So they're like, okay, we'll try to meet your demands for this second part of the lease. I want to say 128 mil was what St. Louis offered through their convention center bureau, which, by the way, the Dome is physically part of the convention center there in St. Louis. Stan offered $700 million. It would have only extended the lease 10 years, so there was no guarantee of the team sticking around if they had basically put $700 million in taxpayer dollars, no private money, into the stadium. So it was at that point that Stan completely cut himself off from the St. Louis side of things. Meanwhile, St. Louis, the Regional Sports Authority, which is under the state of Missouri, Jay Nixon, governor at the time, he sets up a task force called the Peacock Blitz after Dave Peacock and Bob Blitz. They come up with a very brilliant stadium proposal, not too far from where the Dome sits, right on the Mississippi River, with an open air and everything. And the league, I think with Stan's prompting, completely disregarded these plans, and they spent good money on these plans. Meanwhile, at the same time that this is all happening in St. Louis, you have the San Diego Chargers and the Oakland Raiders playing in stadiums that were much older than the Dome. The Dome was built in 95. Jack Murphy Stadium in San Diego built in 1967, and the Oakland Coliseum in 1966.
Yeah. My buddy from California is shaking his head rigorously at that one statement.
Yeah. So these are two teams that are in much more dire needs for stadiums than the Rams are. And they're in states where they don't like giving out public money in California. So yeah. So no. So there was.
Yeah, I heard there was a lot of uproar over the funding of the stadium. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the allocation of the land as well.
Absolutely. And then so this is what happens on the LA side of things. You have two competing plans. One's the Carson plan that would have moved the Raiders and the Chargers to Los Angeles, where, like the Rams, both teams have history there. A lot of people don't know this, but the Chargers' very first year of existence, they were a Los Angeles club. And the Raiders, I'll be talking about them in a second, because the
LA to Oakland, and wasn't it Oakland?
Yeah, it's Oakland to Los Angeles, back to Oakland.
Oh wow! I said there was a first Oakland. I didn't even know about that.
Yeah. So when they moved to LA the first time around, that's when there's
the European context, like
exactly. Teams don't move in Europe. Yeah,
this blows my mind.
Yeah,
like if anyone tried to move a club in Europe, you'd have riots breaking out, and people would be burning down cities.
The only instance I'm aware of where a club moved like that in Europe was Wimbledon. Wimbledon FC.
Yes, that caused a lot of controversy. So let me get into that a bit.
Please.
So there's this club in London called AFC Wimbledon, which used to hover around between League One and the Premier League. They'd occasionally make it their way up the pyramid to the Premier League, and but most of the time they'd hover around the Championship in League One. But they had one famous team who'd won an FA Cup, and that became a kind of a little cult club in South London, right? So they had a very dedicated, loyal local fan base, but the owners decided that they're part of their new project where they're opening up a real estate park in Milton Keynes, which is a town which is about 60, 70 miles outside of London. And it's literally built for the purpose of being an industrial park, right? So they just wanted to move the team so they could have a factory team for the workers, and well, not for the workers, but for the prestige of the new town, right? So they wanted to have a football club there. So they decided to, I think they had holdings in other investments in that Milton Keynes development. So then they wanted to bring it all together, and it caused them to basically withdraw them from Wimbledon. They sold the stadium, they gave the rights up, and then they moved the club over there. And then there was a big legal battle because they wanted to keep some of the old history and stuff. But then there was some legal action taken to the High Court by the fan groups from AFC Wimbledon because they wanted to retain the trademark, and then they couldn't get it. So then they eventually had to change the name to MK Dons, or Milton Keynes Dons, right? So and then they managed to successfully hold on to the trademark, and then they opened up a sort of a Phoenix club called AFC Wimbledon, which kind of rebirthed the club, and now they're back into League Two, I believe.
League One last time I checked. So, yeah.
League One, yeah. I don't know. I haven't checked the table recently, to be honest.
Yeah.
I tend to stop looking at the tables after this horror show of a season we've had. Well, more seasons we've had, really.
All right. So back to LA for a sec. So they have two competing plans. So the Carson plan and then Stan's plan in Inglewood, where he would build that monstrosity that's out there for
Oh
$5
yeah,
billion, $5 or
that
$6
gaudy
billion, I think.
nonsense. I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. The NFL does put together a committee to take a look at these competing plans, and that committee voted 5 owners to 1 for the Carson plan. And this gets into who I choose to support post this whole debacle. The 5 owners that's voted for were Richardson with Carolina, McNair with Houston, Rooney with Pittsburgh, Kraft with New England, and Mara with the New York Football Giants. And the one no vote was Clark Hunt, who owns my local NFL team. So, which, by the way, I had never been a Chiefs fan, and never will. He pretty much cemented that.
You don't like the Chiefs even now.
That's right.
Fair enough. It's kind of like me trying to support Tottenham, I guess. It's like
yeah, that'd be a good good comparison. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, it's
Although
like they're your local team, but you just can't bring yourself to support them. Yeah,
that's right.
I get what you mean.
That's right. Yeah. By the way, the Rams' biggest rival had always been San Francisco. So.
Yeah, so they keep moving around as well. The Rams.
The 49ers, not really. Yeah, they.
No, the 49ers are the one that I think they've been in a while, but the Rams have moved quite a bit. The Raiders have moved.
Oh yeah.
I'm trying to think of who else has done a lot of moves. Didn't the Buccaneers move a couple times? Or
Buccaneers have always been in Tampa.
Tampa, right? Yeah, because their owners also own Manchester United, and they're also in a whole heap of trouble as well because you know they've.
We'll definitely begin to the Super League and
club with debt
just a little
by
bit.
Manchester United. Yeah, no, but even before that, it's kind of like, these tactics have been around for a while. You can kind of see it's one kind of bleeds over into the other. You have a lot of cross the pond financing going both ways and financing all of these suspect deals, you know? So it's more connected than you'd think. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So after this committee votes, they spent hours trying to figure out the plan, and the final plan was by a vote of 30-2 that the Rams would move back to LA while this Inglewood stand was being built. The Chargers were given a year to make up their mind about moving to LA, which they obviously took, and I had a feeling they would. And the Raiders were forced to look elsewhere, and they wound up, of course, moving to Las Vegas in a stadium that was modeled after the aforementioned Carson plan. So that stadium that was built in Vegas for the Raiders, that's the one that could have been built in LA.
Yeah, so they had that plan. The original plan, the one in Vegas, was the one for in LA, just to clarify.
That's right.
Okay.
And it's about a year after all this moving took place. That's when St. Louis finally decided to sue the NFL. All right. And it's all based on their
so it was just a long series of, you tried to give him as much leeway as you could, tried to make him comfortable, but even then he was still intransigent. You wouldn't move, you wouldn't do anything, you would just do what he was going to do. You had this single-minded vision to move him from out of St. Louis back to LA, no matter the cost, right?
Right, something like that. Yeah. And this whole time, he's making everyone in St. Louis think, I'm going to try my best to keep the team in St. Louis. So at both sides of his mouth, he's actually lying, because he's telling the NFL, well, St. Louis is not a football town.
Yeah, I feel like he deliberately riled up a lot of St. Louis fans to kind of prove that, this town is hostile to me and my football team. Can you please allow me to move it to LA? That kind of thing. I feel like he deliberately plays both sides to try and get fans to turn on each other, trying to get fans to turn on the club, get fans to basically blame everybody but the man in charge, right? And as long as they're fighting amongst themselves, he could be like, oh, look, this is a mess. NFL, can you please help me out? Premier League, can you please help me out? Super League, can you please help me out?
Right.
Whatever he wants to do, please help me out, And he doesn't just do this with like NFL or even Premier League. He even does this with like his MLS teams as well. But I think it's Colorado Rapids he owns as well. And
Colorado Rapids.
I've heard that
he also owns Denver Nuggets and Colorado Avalanche in Denver. So yeah, we need to have a Denver person in on this conversation because I'm sure they have.
It's all in the same group.
Yeah.
Because he has his son and his wife on board on a lot of these group or a lot of these group transactions as well.
Yeah.
His son is particularly involved with Arsenal, so that's why he tends to be the public face, because Stan has never actually even shown his face at a board meeting other than the one or two that he was forced to attend. But beyond that, he just doesn't show his face. So Josh Kroenke is the kind of who we see in over here on this side of the pond.
Right.
But we know Josh Kroenke doesn't do anything without Stan's approval. So we know he's involved. If he's involved with the Nuggets, it's Stan who's involved. If he's involved with the Raiders, not the Raiders, sorry, the Rapids, then Stan's involved. If he's involved with Arsenal, then it's Stan who's involved. So it's all a cover and it's all a front, because they like to make sure that there's no one single focal point where you can attack, basically.
Yeah. And I do remember Josh Kroenke playing basketball at Missouri. I think he was teammates with Kareem Rush.
I'd heard about that.
Yeah.
I'd heard about that. Yeah. I mean, I don't know that much about basketball, but I do follow it on a sort of cursively. I dip in now and again, but it's I did hear about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, the relocation policy that came out of the Raiders moving to LA in the first place say that these are some of the criteria that a team must meet before they can be given permission to move. So this is directly from the St. Louis lawsuit. The statement of reasons must address each factor outlined in the relocation policy. Many of the relocation factors are intended to protect the interests and investments of the local community and the stadium authority. These include, but are not limited to, the extent to which the club has satisfied its principal obligation of serving the fans in the current community. Obviously, that didn't happen. The extent to which fan loyalty to and support for the club have been demonstrated in the current community. Given the circumstances, I think St. Louis did a pretty good job supporting that team after all their last 12 years.
It's funny how the playbook is always to blame the fans. It just makes me laugh, because it's like, of course the fans are going to support the club. This is our bread, our butter, our life. We actually have an investment in this stuff that's beyond money. We actually put our hard-earned money into it. How dare they suggest that, it's the fans who are the cause of the problems, but they have the temerity to do so, and that just it's really galling.
There's 12 straight losing years in their time in St. Louis, including the worst 5-year stretch in NFL history, where they finished 15 wins, 65 losses. I know if this were football we were talking about, they would have been relegated a long time ago. Right. Anyway, the willingness of the stadium authority or community to replace.
I feel like that's partly.
That's a deficit of the American way of things.
Partly.
If you do poorly for long enough in American sports, they reward you with top picks and
you get draft
scheduling and everything.
You get first ballot if you come last, I think, and then second ballot if you come second last. I'm just trying to get the idea, because for a lot of Europeans, we've never even heard of a draft, let alone understand the mechanics of it. The idea seems kind of like totally sort of counterproductive to the idea of having a competition, like open competition. If you suck and you get rewarded for it, then obviously why wouldn't you try and suck more?
Exactly.
And you throw games, and then that kind of removes the competitive element, and that's I feel like where a draft system, I guess it's because NFL started as a closed franchise, didn't it? So it was kind of you had to buy your team.
It's a little complicated, but only two of the charter teams of the NFL still exist today. The Arizona Cardinals and the Chicago Bears. The Green Bay Packers are just as old. But yeah, I think it started more of a loose collection of clubs that kind of forced their way together. It's a pretty complex history, but a lot of the clubs that were there at the founding of the NFL no longer exist. So,
right. Okay, that kind of actually sounds similar to how like the Premier League was founded, because that actually was founded out of the remains of the old Division 1. So the Division 1 was part of the Football League, and that was administered by the FA and EFL, right? So they distributed the money across the footballing pyramid. So you go from the Division 1, some of the money will go to Division 2, Division 3, Division 4, Conference, and then you get to non-league as well. And then, but what the Premier League clubs did, there were 5 main breakaway clubs actually at the time. I think it was Arsenal, Everton, Tottenham Hotspur, Manchester United, and Liverpool. So a lot of the familiar faces for the Super League as well.
Right.
They decided to create this sort of breakaway league. They encouraged the other 14 clubs to buy into it at the time. So not all of the 14 members that were there are currently there now, because you have promotion and relegation.
Right.
People can come in and out of the league.
Yeah.
So they never got rid of that aspect of it, but they managed to, do their own sort of marketing brand, TV rights deals, things like that, so they could get extra money pumped into the top of the league, and they could keep a bit distributed more evenly amongst the teams in the league. But then the teams lower down the league kind of suffered as a result. And that's kind of allowed the Premier League to grow into this sort of giant that it is today amongst, the soccer leagues of Europe, you'd say.
Sure. All right. Cool. By the way, parenthetically, I wish we had promotion and relegation, and at least in our soccer here in the U.S.
I feel like because you saw like with the European Super League, they tried to take that away, and that was the thing that was most sort of rabidly fought for by fans of all the teams. Even teams of the Big Six were like, no, we want to keep our promotion and relegation. We want to keep our history and culture, and because our teams kind of started off as sort of like working class teams built out from the ground. They, like, for example, I'll give you Arsenal's history, for example.
Sure.
They were built, they were the factory team for the people who worked at the Royal Arsenal. So the people who make munitions for the army, so make explosives and cannonballs and things like that for the government, right? And so these dock workers, they'd play their football team on the weekend, and they'd get the local dock workers, local people together, and they used to be based in actually the southeast of London. Where the East India Docks currently are. It used to be called Woolwich Arsenal, and then it became Royal Arsenal once they moved to North London.
Right.
But at the time, they were still part of the same workers who basically moved the club, because they moved the factory from Woolwich to Enfield, which is not, and then the club Arsenal was just down the road, basically on the Seven Sisters. So you go past Tottenham and then you end up in Arsenal. It's all very close by. So they set up their kits there, and then we wear red and white because Nottingham Forest, who were the biggest club in England at the time, this is way back in 1886, 1890, so very early on. They got loaned red and white shirts by Nottingham Forest, and then that's been our colours ever since. And then we've been the only club to have never, I think one of 3 clubs that have never been relegated from Division 1 since we've been in it, since 1911. And it's people have had grown up, like, it's generational. My dad grew up watching Arsenal, and I know people whose grandfathers and great grandfathers grew up watching Arsenal. And it's just it's a community vibe. It's not just it's not necessarily just a sports team. It's an extension of the community itself.
Sure.
I feel like football is a lot more localized because England is a lot smaller country than the United States. You
Right.
have a lot greater distances to travel. You don't really get you don't see everybody in your local area that often.
That's right.
I guess you're mostly in cars. It's quite suburbanized. I've been there a few times. I kind of get the idea. Whereas because England is one of the most densely populated countries in the world, actually, if you look at just from land area compared by population, everyone's kind of grouped together. Everyone kind of knows each other. It's a bit, but it used to be like that. Now, because London and places like that exploded, become mega cities, it's not quite the same as it used to be. And I feel that's kind of part of how the culture shifted. But still, there's a lot of ties to the local community you'd expect from football clubs, and that's kind of what's been lost over the years by the Premier League. But they've been selling us the illusion that this community vibe still exists, and that's how they've been making themselves profitable, which is kind of perverse in a way. You know, Stan Kroenke has been a big part of that, where he. Let me get into a bit of how he came into Arsenal. So he bought minority shares, 9% stake from ITV, who used to be one of the main broadcasters in the UK for football games, but then. When the Premier League came about, and then they lost a lot of their rights and stuff, the valuation of the company went down, so they wanted to sell their shares in Arsenal to recoup some losses. So they sold them to Stan Kroenke. So that's how he initially got involved with Arsenal. Then he started slowly buying up shares between the period of like 2007, 2008, till he got to about 29.9% stake in the company, which is crucial because anything above 30, he has to make a bid for all the shares under English football club the bylaws. I'm not exactly know what the legal term is for it, but they had a first refusal for sale, and there was other stakeholders as well who'd had you had fans who'd had minor stakeholdings in the club before. Some of these shares have been in the club for generations, you know. So in these people's families for generations, and then you have other people like who are involved with, say, the House of Lords at the time. So we had Lord Bracewell, Lady Nina Harris, and all of these sorts of upper class toffs, you know, who have like old money and old investments in the club. They were on the board at the time. And then David Dean, the man who'd brought Arsene Wenger to the club, the man, the myth, the legend himself, the guy who's basically made Arsenal into the powerhouse club that they are today. But he saw kind of where the Premier League was heading when after Chelsea had been taken over by Roman Abramovich in 2002, 2003, and then they started buying their way to the title after 2004. They kind of saw which way the wind was blowing, and he decided, I better get a rich investor on board. So then he looked at Stan Kroenke because he thought, this guy has a lot of sports holding in the US. He must know about something about investing in a sports company. So he brought him on board, right? And then there was another, but I think David Dean and Kroenke had a falling out pretty quickly, and it looked like the deal was going to stall for a long time. But then David Dean brought another investor into the club, Alisher Usmanov, who's I think he's Kazakh or Uzbeki. I'm not exactly sure where he's from in the former Soviet Union, but he has holdings in like mineral wealth and things like that. And now he's he also bought a 29% stake in Arsenal as well. So it was basically, there was no gridlock. You got to gridlock at this point because you had these two owners who wanted diametrically opposed things, and neither of them was willing to sell. And then Usmanov came in with a bid to buy out the whole club shares from Kroenke. Kroenke refused. And then eventually Usmanov just lost patience, sold his stake to Kroenke. Then that took him over the limit. So then he forcibly bought the rest of the shares, including the shares that were in like fans' hands that have been in hands for generations. So that left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. And throughout the entire time, we'd been paying off this new stadium we built as well. So we'd moved from our ground, which was Highbury, which we had since before World War One, we had this ground, and that's where our history is tied to. You know, we had great marble walls, and it was part of the heritage. But they decided that they needed to take Arsenal in a new direction. They sold us this dream that we'd be competing with the European giants, that we'd be able to go toe to toe with Bayern Munich. That was the line they sold us, you know. So they took us out of the stadium. They built a whole new one, about not very far, like around the corner. It wasn't necessarily about the distance relocated. It was more about the heritage behind it. And then they built this new big stadium. There was a big issues with like the planning permission with London governments and things like that, and that so it stalled and the costs kept going up. And then the idea with the owner was to help finance this takeover, to help, you know, relieve some of the debts, but Kroenke didn't live up to his end of the bargain. Basically, he ended up just taking consultancy fees and dividend payments and things like that until he was able to buy up the entire club. And now he doesn't even have to report his financial figures, so we don't even know how much he's taking out. But throughout that entire period, we've been basically under austerity. So we haven't had enough money for transfers. We've had to sell best players pretty much every season. We've been sold lies and dreams, and football's been getting more and more mediocre every season. He even threw Arsene Wenger under the bus to try and save his own reputation. He got the fans turning against each other. There were arguments amongst the fan base. People were just getting vicious. Then once Arsene Wenger left, then he tried to bring Unai Emery in. That didn't work out because Unai Emery started to point out that he wasn't being given the proper tools for the job. He was only allowed loan signings, and he wasn't allowed to, you know, invest in a proper team. And the players were bought based on marketability and not footballing reasons. So it was turning into basically kind of a comedy club, you know, where sort of people could come on holidays, you know, these older established players with marketable names but not real worth can come in and get huge contracts to sit around and basically underperform. And then we could kind of see the trend sliding. The winning mentality got lost out of the team. And then eventually we got to the point now where we're almost out of Europe completely. We're 10th this season in the league. So this is our lowest ever finished in 25 years.
Wow.
We're on the verge of getting knocked out of the Europa League semi-final, which is our only route back to the Champions League. We have a completely inexperienced manager in charge, a squad that is totally dysfunctional over years of neglect, and an ownership whose only aim is to actually divorce the results from the profitability. And we've gotten to this situation where it's turned into this entire poisonous atmosphere, which is dragging the whole club down. And while the commercial revenues have gone up, the success has gone down. And relative to our competitors and our peers, we've actually regressed. Because before Kroenke took over the club, Arsenal were the most profitable club in Europe. As now we're maybe 8th or 9th most profitable.
Wow.
So it's just a clear case of pure neglect, and he fed lies to the fans over the years. And then when he tries to do this European Super League behind our doors, that was just the last straw for a lot of people. He literally tried to stab the entire footballing pyramid in the back. And for a lot of us, the footballing pyramid is sacred because we all participate in it at some point in our lives, you know? When you're a kid growing up playing kick about with your school team or your local club team in the park or on your local 5-a-side pitch, that's part of the footballing pyramid. You get resources from that. And they wanted to destroy basically an entire culture and way of life in not just England, but Europe, you know, with this whole Super League. Because what eventually would happen, the less money would go to those teams. Those teams would start folding. They'd have to send all their best players to the Super League. None of these teams can drop out, so they can continue being mediocre. So none of the fans who've been following the club will like watching what they're seeing. Then you have, eventually, they'll start having exhibition games where you'll have Arsenal playing a home game in LA, or Manchester United playing a home game in the Fenway Stadium, or You have Abu Dhabi, Manchester City and Abu Dhabi playing PSG and things like that, you know. So that's where you feel like that was where it was going, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
It was all
sounded to
about
me like they were trying to Americanize European soccer.
They were totally trying to Americanize it, and the main forces behind this were the Glazers, the guys who are behind Tampa Bay and Manchester United, Kroenke, and John Henry, the guy behind the Red Sox and Liverpool.
Right.
So those are the three main driving forces behind this European Super League. Florentino Perez was the face they put on it because he's got the most sort of credibility in the footballing world. Well, he used to. Now he's a total laughingstock. Right. But he had he was the face of it, and Real Madrid wanted to buy into this because they had basically been making the most money out of every club in Europe, but they'd been mismanaging their funds so spectacularly that they managed to put themselves over €1 billion in debt.
Wow.
So that's what they want. Yeah. They spend ridiculous money on ridiculous players that have not paid off whatsoever, basically. And they just feel entitled to keep robbing the rest of the Spanish league and robbing the other clubs in Europe to basically fund their gaudy monstrosity of a club. And they're the ones kind of who allowed them, Juventus, Arsenal, Manchester United and Liverpool, they were the ones who kind of wanted this thing to happen because they were the big established clubs and they were afraid of the new boys on the block, the Chelseas, the Man Cities, the PSGs, the Leicesters, even the Ajaxes. You have teams like that who come up, who could punch above their weight because I don't know if you get. I feel like the kind of the charm of almost the Premier League is that any team can beat any team at any time. That one day like Arsenal can lose to Burnley or Manchester City can get humiliated by Aston Villa, like Liverpool could get humiliated by Aston Villa, or something like that can happen. It's just that's part of the charm of why a lot of local fans sort of watch this game. And I feel like I kind of needed to sort of express sort of the entire picture, just because I don't know how much connected or disconnected this kind of is for American sports perspective, but from a European sports perspective, you can't really kind of understand almost like if you try, like if, for example, moving a team, there was one case of it and that caused so much uproar that no one's ever tried it ever again. And then the European Super League, I feel like that was the first time I've ever seen unity across like partisan lines, footballing lines, racial lines, whatever lines. Everyone was unanimously against this thing from all over Europe, pretty much. The only people who wanted it were the 12 greedy bastards who were trying to put this into place,
Right. Yeah, you definitely see the parallels.
Yeah. So I feel like you're seeing a lot of parallels between the Rams, Arsenal, even the other sports teams in the Kroenke Sports Entertainment Group. I feel like the name should have been the clue, really. He doesn't want to provide sports, he wants to provide sports entertainment, the facade of sports, the illusion of sports. He wants to sell us the illusion of loyalty to a club. He wants to sell us the illusion of success, you know? Like he's always does just well enough that he's not losing money, but never so well that he has to actually put in more money to maintain those standards,
Right. I think he only, as an owner, as a full owner, I think he only has one league trophy. That'd be the Stanley Cup when he first bought the Avalanche.
Yeah. Arsenal is actually his most successful franchise.
Yeah, and they're all FA Cups, if I'm not mistaken.
It's actually his most successful franchise. We have, under his reign, we have 3 FA Cups and a Charity Shield, which is, well, 2 Charity Shields, but they're basically glorified pre-season friendlies, so I don't really count them.
Right.
So, yeah, even then, I don't put them up to Kroenke. I put them up to Wenger. Basically, it was Arsene Wenger who built the success. Because before Kroenke come in, we'd been winning Premier League titles constantly. We even went an entire season unbeaten. We got to a Champions League final this year before Kroenke took over, and we move into the new stadium. Kroenke takes over, and it all goes downhill straight from there. We lost our heritage, we lost our ties to our community, and we lost our footballing success. we sold ourselves to the devil and we got peanuts.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty messed up. And even outside
pretty messed
sports,
up, but it's what these billionaire assholes like to do. You know, they have nothing is sacred to them. Everything is just a tool they can use and abuse. Because I feel like it's no problem being a rich guy, right? But I feel like when you get to a certain level of wealth, you have to have a certain level of sociopathy to be able to bulldoze other people out of the way.
right?
I mean, for example, there was this. I think wasn't he building his Texas ranch? He drove a man off his land through eminent domain.
I was going to bring that up.
That man drove.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the kind of mindset I was trying to get at.
So what happened there? So this is like right after the LA debacle, as I will call it from now on. He buys the Wagner Ranch in North Texas, which is huge, like over 500,000 acres, huge. And on this ranch, there was a small settlement called Lake Diversion, which was mostly retirees and everything. And they had a special lease with the ranch. They were allowed to set up shop there, and they were basically left to do their own thing. Well, Kroenke comes in, he buys the ranch and tells all these people, get out. I'm not going to renew these leases and everything. So he forced all these retirees to leave. And yes, he did lead one of those men to commit suicide. And in the suicide note, he specifically blames Stan.
Yeah. So basically, he's the one we know of.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one suicide that we know of that was caused by Kroenke. There's probably been countless others from all of his sports franchises, all of his other dealings with Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Walmart in itself is quite an horrid institution. I'd like to say. I had the unfortunate experience of being in one in California, and I think the only way I could describe it is it's bizarre for a European.
Mm-hmm.
These big box stores.
Right.
I mean, we do have big supermarkets in Europe, but they never get this sort of size. Where everything is kind of like it's your only place kind of to go, because it's got everything, and it's all very low quality, very sort of scattered, haphazard. You can't find your way around. I think I got lost in there for like an hour. And I ended up wandering into the rifle section by mistake, and that was mind-blowing as well as a European, that you could just buy rifles at the supermarket. But I digress. But the point is that I heard like basically like 30% of their workers are on food stamps.
Mm-hmm.
That they commit elder abuse amongst their meter greeters. They undercut small businesses and destroy local business ecosystems. They tried to do the same thing in Europe, actually, funnily enough. They tried to open up a similar kind of Walmart kind of culture in Germany, funnily enough, and the Germans were not having it. They realized pretty much immediately that they weren't going to get away with the same kind of things that they could get away in the US. Like, for example, you get like in Walmart, you get these corporate culture chants type thing where they do these mantras, and then they show these corporate videos where they explain like the disadvantages of unionizing and all this sort of stuff, And in Germany, because they have such robust like labor laws and unions and things like that, they tried rolling up with this American outlook and plonked themselves there. And then they went under within a year, the Walmart franchise. They ended up actually buying the Asda franchise in the UK in the end. So they still do have a foothold in Europe, in the UK at least. That they're now part of the Walmart group, and I've noticed that their stores have been getting bigger and gaudier ever since they've been taken over as well. So they have a certain business model when it comes to pretty much all their dealings. They want to take something and basically minimize the quality and maximize the revenue in order to get the biggest profits, basically. So they'll just make it bigger, more unnecessary, more sort of further detached from what you used to know it as, and they slowly suck the life out of whatever whatever entity they're involved in, whether it be a business, a football club, an NFL team, an MLS team. There's a pattern with this guy, and I'm afraid that it's getting to the point where somebody is going to have to start, putting these parallels together. And I feel like this is why I'm glad you brought me on here.
Yeah,
we're all suffering from the same thing, in a sense. The same guy is causing so much pain in multiple cities around the globe, right? And all he's doing is he's using the same tactics, and he's doing divide and conquer, and he's making to piecemeal together this empire of greed for himself. And I feel like we've been so caught in our own little insular bubble, our own little struggle. Like, for example, because Arsenal fans were griping about what was going on here in London, we didn't really notice that the Rams had gotten taken over by got moved to LA until it was far too late.
Yeah,
that should have been the opening shot. That should have been the moment we would be like, oh, yo, this guy isn't right. We need to get him out immediately because he's going to do something similar to Arsenal one of these days. Because a man doesn't change a leopard doesn't change its spots, and a man doesn't change its colors. He just hides them better. That's what they do. And I feel like I kind of feel almost like survivor's guilt almost from. Like, we're one of the few clubs that's still somehow functioning under his rule, and that's despite him, not because of him.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. With that whole St. Louis to LA, he branded St. Louis as a dying NFL city, a bad NFL city, and branded as just a baseball town. Mostly because because the Cardinals have been the second most successful team in Major League Baseball in terms of winning the World Series, behind only the Yankees. And
so they're pretty much equivalent to
idiots out in LA. You have these idiots out in LA saying, "Oh, the Rams are just coming home. He's just bringing them home and everything." Much like I don't know, because all the LA people I've ever talked to, even they didn't want the Rams to come back. Exactly.
They were like, "Oh, fuck me, there's more traffic in Inglewood."
Yeah.
Then pretty much that was the kind of the reaction I got.
If you're going to listen,
this fucking gaudy thing is causing more traffic on the 305. Fuck me.
If you're going to listen to LA fans, you bring the Raiders back, because the Raiders actually had success in.
Yeah, they wanted the Raiders back. They didn't want the Rams. They wanted the Raiders.
They didn't want
what I heard.
And the Rams aren't even originally from LA. They're originally from Cleveland. A lot of people tend to ignore that fact, that the team was originally from Cleveland, of all places.
Cleveland, Ohio, yeah, right.
Ohio, yeah.
But again, this is kind of like this is the disconnect that I have, because it just seems like par for the course moving teams around in America, whereas if you, like I said before, if you tried that in Europe, there'd be riots, So it's just I feel like that's kind of where the disconnect with the Kroenkes comes in as well, because I think he just doesn't understand the nature of it, like English football, European football in general. He kind of treats it like he would an NFL franchise. He treats Arsenal pretty much like he would the LA Rams. It's just the same. He calls them the jewels in his crown, Arsenal and the LA Rams. He calls them the jewels in his crown, because they're the two most successful teams he's got. They're the ones with the big money and the big cities with the big stadiums, So big high profile. That's the one because that's what it's all about, really. It's ego. It's not. He doesn't want to actually put the effort in to make these teams successful. He wants to do it through the back door because he's a lazy cunt. And billionaires in general are lazy cunts. They just take over somebody else's hard work and profit off it. That's what they do.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I don't want to sound like a Marxist or anything, because I don't think I don't believe in that kind of shit. But it's there is a certain point where you can put certain value into it. You can work hard. You can make your money. You can do what you like. You can be successful. But then there's a certain point where you're not just being successful, you're being a parasite. You're sucking up other people's success, you know? And I feel like a parasite is the perfect way to describe Kroenke. He latches himself onto your club and he sucks the life out of it until there's nothing left but a shallow husk. And then he fucking moves it somewhere else.
Yeah. So
I know it just sounds all too familiar. Your story and my story, their parallels are so unfortunately resonant. I feel so much sympathy for you. I could not imagine my team being ripped from me and moved abroad. I feel like this European Super League was the closest thing to it, because I almost considered quitting supporting Arsenal. That's how bad it got, you know? And that was not just me, like my family my friends, all of them were disgusted. And not just the Manchester United fans and the Arsenal fans and the Liverpool fans, but every fan.
Right.
I talked to Ajax fans here in Amsterdam. They hated it. Like their club unequivocally came out against it because Ajax here in Amsterdam are a differently run model. They're part owned by the fans, you see. So they have a part owned by the municipality of Amsterdam, part owned by the fans, part owned by the government, and then part owned by shareholders. So there's kind of like a checks and balances system where no one entity can kind of overpower the other. It doesn't necessarily make for like the biggest, most profitable initiative, but they are the most successful club in the Netherlands, and they have been punching well above their weight in Europe. They have 4 Champions Leagues in their history, which is more than a lot of clubs do. They have great European success. Even up till 2 years ago, they got up to the semi-finals of the Champions League and up to the quarterfinals of the Europa League this year. So they're always perennially in Europe. They're a very well-run community club, and you kind of see the differences when you get like between like almost that level of a club. Then you move to Arsenal, and then you come to say like the LA Rams. Like it's kind of the progression. Ajax is what Arsenal used to be, and LA Rams is what Kroenke wants Arsenal to become.
Wow. So yeah, wow. Communities. I wish some of our teams here in the States were more community owned. As it stands, there's only one, the Green Bay Packers.
I heard about them. They're
tiny town in northern Wisconsin, right on Green Bay, has appropriate.
Yeah,
there are more
Green Bay.
There are more fan shareholders of the Packers than there are actual residents of Green Bay. So,
at least they didn't name them the Greens or something like that.
Yeah. Well, their colors are green, so yeah. There you go.
I mean, it's just like sometimes I feel like these Americans also owners like to take liberties of names as well. You know, like when you come to like these NFL franchises or MLS in particular, I feel like that's a better example almost.
Right.
With the MLS, it's kind of just you kind of have to buy into this new sort of initiative, and these teams just spring out of nowhere, kind of, you know, like the New York Red Bulls, like they're kind of just an extension of the City Group. You got I think Miami Heat in Florida, which are actually also part owned by the Glazers as well. And Beckham and the Glazers, because Beckham is the face of it, because you know he's from his Manchester United days. He knows the Glazers. They have links to because they still used to do ambassadorships and things like that for the club. So this, you know, when you're a player at a club, you're never really a former player. You know what I mean? You're a former player, but you're never really a former player. You know what I mean? Unless it's very rare that you'd get like former players speaking out against ownership, which is kind of why the European Super League was such a sort of a rare occasion, you know, because we had like club legends like Ian Wright, for example, who actually came out with straight up #Kroenke out. I feel like this is why the European Super League is kind of like where Kroenke pushed the envelope too far. He got on too cocky, too reckless, and he'd open up a can of worms he didn't expect to open, you know. So because now he's got like people in government looking at him in the UK now. They're looking at doing a review of how football ownership works and of the Premier League and in general. The government's looking at doing an inquiry into that. we have the Speaker of the House of Commons, who's actually an avid Arsenal fan and a season ticket holder, the former Speaker of the House of Commons. Mr. Burko, the order guy, if you don't know who he is,
Right.
you know, order, if you don't know who he is, you know. He's he spoke out publicly, and he straight up said Kroenke out as well. He talked about I think he said the temerity, the audacity, the sheer brass balls of these owners to go behind our back and stab us in the back in the dead of the night. I think I'm misquoting it because his language is far better than mine. But there are plenty. I feel like the thing is, it's like because of the universal condemnation across Europe, he's starting to get attention in the British press. Before, the British press would never talk about him. He was a very much a silent partner of Arsenal. He's silent stand. No one ever heard from him. You know, he'd always hid away from the fans. He'd always hid away from conferences. He'd always send his son out to do his dirty business whenever the heat got too heavy. And he even tried that again with after the Super League debacle. There was this fan forum, and the Kroenkes, they sent Kroenke out to talk to them. And I think one of the fans straight up said, "You do not know anything about English football. You do not know anything about the history or the value of the club. Why do you even bother owning this club? Just leave." Right? Instead, told him straight to his face, and he's like, "No, I think we're excited. We're gonna be part of this process for the summer. We're gonna be looking in a big ways, but we don't think long-term investment is the way forward." He straight up said that, "Oh, we're not gonna put any money into the club," while at the same time be excited for the transfer window. He talks out of his head and his ass at the same time. You know, the man is an overgrown turd. I'm sorry, just like Josh Kroenke in particular just gets my gore because he should know better. Like his dad is an out of touch old guy who doesn't have any soul or any love for anything that's pure. But Josh Kroenke should know better. He played sports. He invested in his sports teams. He supposedly is the one who likes to actually get involved with the teams, but all he does is just feed us nonsense and bullshit time and time and again and expect us to swallow it. Trust the process. I think that's the set. He stole the Philadelphia 76ers tagline and just repackaged it for Arsenal.
Wow.
He literally did that.
Oh my God.
And I feel like trust the process literally equals swallow my bullshit. Just swallow it. Eat it. Eat it up, please. Please, because that's all I'm going to be feeding you. Bullshit.
Again, the parallels, because it's.
I'm sorry, this guy really gets on my nerves.
But hey, at least we got that lawsuit to look forward to.
I hope you guys take him to the cleaners. I hope you do. Yeah. And I feel like the other thing that's as a result of this is now there's actually interest for a takeover bid for Arsenal.
I heard about that. Yeah,
guy on Spotify. Yeah, he's come out suddenly. He's like, "Oh, I'm interested in throwing my hat into the ring," you know. And I don't know about this guy really because he's kind of popped out of nowhere. You know what I mean? Like I hadn't heard about him before, like last week. You know, so he kind of stayed under the radar as well. And I don't like people I don't really know because after once bitten with Kroenke, you don't want to be twice stung. Right. But the way he's starting off on a good note. You know, he's getting people like legends of the club, like Thierry Henry, who's our all-time top scorer and who's literally been last week been inducted into the Premier League Hall of Fame. So he is one of the top players in football. So he's got a lot of clout behind him. Dennis Bergkamp, another one. He's a great of Ajax and Arsenal and the Netherlands football team, and he's got a lot of clout in the game as well. Patrick Vieira, a former captain, the guy who captained us to the Invincible season, where we were 49 games straight unbeaten, which has never been done in the history of English football, and probably never will be done since. Even Manchester City can't do that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have to have a little bit of pride in my team, you know.
Of course.
I feel like you have your pride in your you know, when the Rams, St. Louis Rams, won your first Super Bowl, right? You must have had so much pride in your team at that moment.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
and there were legends there too.
Actually, I just want to
Marshall
get an idea. What was your favorite sporting moment from the Rams? Because I like to hear more about like how the fans perceive their sports. You know, what was your favorite sporting moment from the Rams?
It probably would be Super Bowl 34. You know, you had this team that were a losing team the year before. They bring in, they draft Torrey Holtz. Isaac Bruce was already on the team. They trade for Marshall Faulk. They had drafted Orlando Pace 2 years earlier, all Hall of Famers. And they have this guy who went undrafted and posts probably one of the best quarterback seasons ever. I'm talking about Kurt Warner, of course. A guy who
I've heard
so undervalued as a player. That's
even I've heard of him. That's how famous he is.
Yeah,
so like
he stocks shelves at Hy-Vee, you know, the local. But we do have a couple of Hy-Vees.
Basically, I'm an ingrate. I don't know anything about the NFL, but even I've heard of him. So like that tells you the stature of the guy. So I feel like he's the equivalent of like Thierry Henry, right? You know.
Oh wow, that's a great comparison. Yeah. So this ragtag bunch of guys, they get to the Super Bowl and win it on the strength of one tackle at the very end. Mike Jones tackling Kevin Dyson just shy of that end zone, which would have tied the game. But Jones, who was also very vocal about keeping the team in St. Louis, just wrapped the guy up and kept him from scoring. And the famous image of Dyson reaching like that with the football. Those are the Rams I want to remember. So,
I know. I feel you. I feel you completely. Like the Invincibles, the Arsenal I want to remember. So it's like, but I feel like my favorite actual sporting moment isn't actually the Invincibles, even though it's most Arsenal fans is because, you know, but I feel that this is more personal to me, I guess. I actually was lucky enough to get tickets for the 2015 FA Cup final, Arsenal versus Chelsea at Wembley Stadium, right? And I went with my brother, and it was it was just the perfect game, you know. Arsenal were the underdogs. Chelsea had just won the title that season, and Arsenal had to come off the back of a horrible end of the season. So we were the complete underdogs. The fans turned up early. We were all got the beers in. We were all making noise. You know, the camaraderie was there. We all went into the stadium. Wembley is I think the largest stadium in England. It's got 100,000 capacity. It's pretty big, you know. And it's the National Football Stadium, and it's not far from where I my parents live and where I used to live in London, actually. So like it used to be down the road from me. So it's very personal to me, you know. Going to Wembley, see my club. She wore a yellow ribbon, you know, and then we got the scarves. We went in, we sang our throws out. Arsenal won 2-1. We clinched the cup. I got to see my team celebrate, and we got to cheer our way all the way down Wembley Way. I went to a family wedding straight afterwards in our Arsenal kits, right? Me and my brother, we turned up there. All of the family were watching the game as well, and we were all cheering, and drinks open bar. We were all getting, it was just perfect, you know. And I feel like those are the memories that sports fans hold dear, and those are the memories that the Kroenkes do not give a fuck about.
Right.
And I feel like that's the galling thing. Like, I don't know about this Eck guy. He claims he's been an Arsenal supporter since 8, but I don't know if he felt the sort of the passion that I felt. Like, say the passion you felt when you were watching the Rams win that Super Bowl. You never wanted your life and soul. You feel like the energy of the whole environment, you know. It's electric. It's the only way of describing it. And I get warm, fuzzy feelings thinking about the good days, you know, when we used to do stuff before we became this hollowed out shell of what we are, you know.
Yeah.
It was the last trophy won under Wenger as well, you know. And Wenger was honestly like the greatest coach Arsenal ever had. You know, he was in the job for 21 years.
Mm-hmm.
He revolutionized English football. He turned it almost into the professional kind of thing it was, because the Premier League made it popular, but Arsene Wenger made it professional. You know, he's the one who introduced sports science, diets, physical training regimens, banned alcohol. Because before, like Arsenal's, lots of members of the Arsenal squad used to have really bad alcohol issues. In fact, lots of clubs in England, they'd all be getting smashed at the weekend, every weekend after the games. It's just that was the culture. So he revolutionized the culture. He made Arsenal this professional team, you know, and he took us to cup doubles and invincible seasons and almost to a Champions League trophy. That final in Paris against Barcelona is the most haunting memory of my life, because that's where the club was, like, where it could have been, because that was where the club turned to the worst. That Champions League final was, if we'd won that, we could have cemented ourselves as one of the European greats. We could have, we wouldn't have needed the investment from the Kroenkes. We could have avoided them entirely. We could have gone down a different path. We could have kept our stadium. We didn't have to move into this new stadium. I mean, don't get me wrong, I grew up watching that more, because the old stadium kind of I was a bit younger when I was going, then I don't have as clear memories of that. Whereas I have more memories of this stadium, so don't get me wrong, I still have pleasant memories, but I feel like it's been to the detriment of the club as a whole, because it's been an anchor chain around the club from moving forward, because we always had that stadium debt holding us back from investing in the team.
Right.
And then you have the Kroenkes who do this fugazi, worm their way in slowly, and then do a hostile takeover of the club when you're not expecting it. And then suddenly he rules it like its own little fief, where he appoints his own lackeys who are based not on competence, but on civility. And they make incompetent business decisions. They're just trying to get middle of the road, not be so successful that they have to spend, not so unsuccessful that they lose money. Just string the fans along as they can, keep them releasing kits, releasing merchandise, changing the logo, changing the brand, changing everything, you know. It's just, and you slowly seeing the commercialization of football like really turn into this ugly thing. And the Kroenkes were a big part of it. They are, I think, one of the driving forces behind it, really, because they had to get the idea from somewhere, and the idea came from the Glazers, the Kroenkes, and the Henrys. Those three, the terrible trio. They own the biggest three clubs in England, and therefore own the biggest three clubs in practically the world. So you have this situation where they are afraid of losing power. They see what goes in America, you know, this closed system where profits are guaranteed no matter how shit you are. Draft picks can eventually come through. I can monetize it, but maybe having a game in Abu Dhabi or in China or in LA. And then maybe even do our own streaming service, things like that. Go postal, go global, maybe partner with Amazon or Google or Facebook, JP Morgan, people like that. That's who were getting behind this whole Super League initiative, because the funding came from JP Morgan. The Amazon were looking at getting the sports rights, even though they lied about it later and said that they weren't. Google and Facebook are also looking at maybe getting rights for streaming service for the Super League. There was a windfall payment for each club of 330 million a year, plus a 3 billion windfall for joining each club. It's just a total way of dwarfing all the other competition. It would destroy the lower leagues completely, because how can a Leicester City or a West Ham, who've done the right thing, built their clubs up the right way, and made success of their own, and then they're suddenly getting just smacked in the face by this shit Arsenal team who suddenly got all the money. And it was galling, because I feel like Leicester City are a good example of like how a Premier League club should be run. You know,
I agree.
Leicester City have one of the greatest stories in English football. When yo-yoing from the Championship to the Premier League, not really getting a stable foothold.
Mm-hmm.
One season they were 20th in the table, looking to get relegated. They managed to fight their way all the way up out of the relegation zone, and then they took that form into the next season all the way to winning a title. It had never been done in the history of English football. The odds were 5,000 to 1 on the book from the bookies. If you, there were cases of people who put like 50 quid bets on Leicester to win as a joke, and then ended up winning like 250 grand.
Wow.
You know, it's and they did it the right way. They got smart recruitment. Their owners were a family unit from Thailand, right, who bought into the company. They're billionaires themselves, but they have the different kind of mindset, because Thailand is a different kind of corporate culture to the US. They made efforts to ingratiate themselves to the fans from the beginnings. Like at football games, they offered free beer and pretzels and things like that, you know, which is, I don't see any other football club doing that. And then another good example is like there was this during the COVID pandemic, the Premier League was trying to push this idea of pay-per-view to try and monetize it more, because there weren't any fans going to the grounds. They wanted to get, the teams wanted to get more money. Not 19 out of 20 clubs voted in favor of it. The only club to vote against it was Leicester City. So they understood, because they understood their profit doesn't come from necessarily the revenue straight up out of the gate. Their profit comes from the engagement for the fans. They wanted a long-term sort of plan at Leicester City, where they want to build them up from a club that was yo-yoing out of Championship, League One, into basically arguably the team that should replace Arsenal in the top 6, by the way they've been going. Because they've been running the right way, Arsenal have been run entirely the wrong way. The way Arsenal's regression has been mirrored by Leicester's progression has been kind of ironic almost. Everton are another one. Everton are a historical club, the rivals to Liverpool. Literally, the grounds are right across the road from each other. The fans have this whole thing. It's the Merseyside derby is one of the most intense in English football, right?
Right.
But they've fallen off for a while after David Moyes got poached by Man United. They'd fallen off for a little while, and the guy Alisher Usmanov, who tried to buy Arsenal earlier but got rebuffed by Kroenke, he got fed up, so he bought a stake in Everton, and now he's been putting money into the team. He hired Carlo Ancelotti, who's one of the greatest managers in the game. You know, won multiple Champions Leagues with managed teams like Chelsea, Juventus. You know, great teams. You know, and he's got them in. He's building a new stadium upgrade for the Goodison Park. So they're refurbishing it, expanding it to make extra stand. They're not removing it, they're expanding it. That's the crucial difference, because they're not removing the heritage, which is unlike, say, Tottenham, for example, where they just bulldozed the whole thing and built a new one, or Arsenal, where they bulldozed the whole thing and built a new one. It's because those two clubs are owned by American consortiums, or full owned by American consortiums. Same with Manchester City and Chelsea kind of fall in a different category, because they fall under the sports washing category. They're a little more insidious in a different way. They're not necessarily in it for the money. They're in it for the good rep they can get, because they're mostly owned by Roman Abramovich, for example. He's got very close ties with the Putin regime in Russia, because any oligarch in Russia who hasn't been put in jail basically has close ties with Putin, but him especially, he's in the inner circle. And Sheikh Mansour, he's literally a prince from Abu Dhabi, right? Who's laundering his ill-begotten gains through Europe. You know, Qatar, literally the country of Qatar, have just straight up bought Paris Saint-Germain. There are, you know, so these three clubs have kind of distorted the world of football around them, because they're the ones who kind of oversaturated and inflated the market with transfers, and kind of made these running costs go so high that the previous big boys are panicking, you know?
Right.
Because suddenly now Real Madrid has to pay 110 million for a player instead of what was 20 million. A player that would have cost 40 million like 10 years ago, or 10 million 20 years ago. You know, it's the inflation has been skyrocketing beyond belief. Like, for example, Neymar was the most expensive transfer in the world, 213 million euros. So I think that's $250 million.
Right.
Yeah.
And also,
that kind of distorted.
I was thinking, what about clubs like an Aston Villa or a Nottingham Forest, which have won European Cups?
Yes, those are the ones who get who really suffer from all of this. They're the true victims of them. The Nottingham Forests, the Aston Villas, the Leeds. You know, they're a very storied club as well, but they got mismanaged into the ground and got relegated for it. Because it wasn't the football that was dragging them down, it was the financials. And that's what got them relegated in the end. They ended up getting banished all the way back to the non-leagues. They had to work their way all the way up again. So the fact that they got back to the Premier League is a testament to, you know, the story of the football pyramid. You know, it's the part of the whole culture. And that's what the European Super League tried to destroy. And that's why every fan in Europe wants Stan Kroenke's neck on a fucking chopping block, you know? I certainly do. Yeah. I want him out of my fucking club. Kroenke out all day.
That's right, Kroenke out. I 100%. Yeah. So. All right. Well, I think we've gone well over almost an hour and a half. And,
yeah, I'm surprised how fast it's gone. It's really
absolutely, yeah. Well, thanks for.
I mean, if you ever need like a European correspondent, just let me know. I'm happy to be there.
All right, awesome. Thanks for being on, and we will talk again soon.
This podcast is Uncalled For is hosted, produced and edited by Mike Chernevsky. Opening music is Fantasia by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. The outro music for this episode is Cuba Libre by Eaters, licensed under a Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 international license. Special thanks to Reddit and the subreddit Fuck Stan Kroenke for making this episode of the podcast possible. Please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast through your favorite podcasting platform, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/uncalledforpodcast, and check out our blog with show notes at uncalledfor.home.blog. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next time.
Cheers, by the way.
Cheers, all right.
Anyway, whenever you're ready to start.
All right.
You're ready to start. So.
All right.